Essay 4 from the July 2023 California Bar Exam. Put this in context. This is Tuesday afternoon during a 2-day bar exam. In the morning, 3 hours to write 3 essays. In the afternoon, 3.5 hours to write 2 essays and 1 performance test. You're going to need 90 minutes to write the performance test, which leaves you 1 hour each for the 2 essays, and you have to hold yourself to that. So the first thing you see is 2 calls. With what crime or crimes can Deborah reasonably be charged? What defense or defenses can she reasonably raise, and what's the likely outcome? Pure criminal law call. The second call asks, should the court grant Deborah's motion to suppress her statement? So this is a crimes hypothetical with a pure criminal law call, and the second call is probably about custodial interrogation. It's probably a statement that incriminates her, and the issue is custodial interrogation. So as you start this hypothetical, before you even read the facts, you should have your own brief checklist, sort of an outline in mind. Let's take a look at ours. So I'm going to go over to Proponics, our system of schemas online, unfolding schemas. There will be a link below if you're interested in seeing that product. I go to criminal law, and I see that what I could be tested on are general principles, crimes against the person, crimes against habitation, theft crimes, inchoate offenses, and defenses. And pretty much all of that gets tested on the California bar, but not all at once. And I don't know what we have here, so let's go back to the facts. By the way, on the California bar, the defendant is always a D name. If there are other characters in the hypothetical, that helps you remember who the defendant is or is going to be. And here we have Deborah. We have Deborah was homeless and without money. One night, the temperatures were below freezing and continuing to drop. Deborah realized she might die if she did not find shelter. They're pointing you to defenses for crimes. Necessity, duress, some sort of defense. She found a rundown house with an attached garage that had a door connecting it to the house. What are those facts for? We're talking about a living place. So what's that relevant to? Perhaps arson? Don't know. We'll see coming up. She thought the house was unoccupied. She went around to the side of the garage, looked through a window, and saw a stack of wood. Deborah decided to go into the garage, take some of the wood, and build a fire outside the garage to keep herself warm. So hold it right there and let's talk about this. From what we've read so far, we're going to have defenses, especially duress. But the defenses in general is what I need to have in mind. So what do I need to have in my mind in the bar exam about defenses in criminal law? Let's take a look in our schemas. Well, if I'm thinking about defenses, I have to realize there are defenses that go to responsibility and capacity, to justifications, and to excuses. They gave us the fact that she was homeless. If I had the time, I would explain that that does not necessarily mean that she lacked capacity. But most of what they're pointing to here appears to me to go to the defense of necessity. Pressure from natural or physical forces made it reasonably necessary. And so what you do is look at the harm of complying with the law and balance that against the harm from violating the law. The defense of duress would require a threat of death or serious bodily harm directed at her or her family, and coercion. And the situation creating it can't be her own fault. Now, I don't see anything that makes me think that I need to raise that here, but I could analyze it. defenses like mistake of fact, you could use mistake of fact if it negates intent for whatever offense is coming up here. And it looks like we're going to see breaking and entering, a theft crime. So go back to the facts and let's see where we're going with this. So we know that she might die if she didn't find shelter, and we saw that she found a rundown house with an attached garage that had a door connecting it to the house. They've told us nighttime and a house. This looks like they're pointing me toward burglary. What about the garage? The fact that she is looking at the garage, not the house. Well, it's part of the house. So would I analyze that? Perhaps, but I think this is a residence. And so if we're talking about burglary, I think you'd meet that element. She went around to the side of the garage, looked through a window, saw a stack of wood, decided to go into the garage, take some of the wood, and build a fire outside the garage to keep herself warm. So we need to look at crimes against habitation. Let's go back to that proponic schema, open up crimes against habitation, and there we see burglary and arson. Burglary has 6 elements, arson has 4. Burglary, breaking or exceeding the scope of consent and entering of a dwelling, a place used for sleeping, of another at nighttime with intent to commit a felony therein. Okay, this is breaking and entering. It is a dwelling. Yeah, we're talking about a garage, but it's attached to the house. It's part of the house. Of another at nighttime, they gave us at nighttime, with intent to commit a felony therein. What's the felony? It's not arson, that's going to be outside, but the felony therein is probably a theft crime. Arson is malicious burning of the dwelling house of another. Are we going to see facts that go to that coming up? I suspect so. We don't see those facts yet because she's going to burn the wood outside, not burn the house down. But the theft crimes, look at larceny. 5 elements. Let's open that up. Trespassery, yeah, she's going to trespass into the garage. Taking, wrongful by trespass, we have that. Carrying away, however slight, yeah, she's going to pick up the wood. Personal property of another without consent, we have that, with the specific intent to permanently deprive the victim of his interest. Well, she's going to burn it. That's certainly going to permanently deprive the victim of his interest. So I think the felony therein is larceny. So I know that I need to write up crimes against habitation. I need to write up at least this theft crime. But now back to the hypothetical to see what else happens. She broke the window to get into the garage because of the extreme cold. So we have the breaking, right, and entering. Because of the extreme cold, Deborah decided to stay in the garage. But notice you have to focus on her intent when she did the breaking and entering. Once she got in, she decided to stay. She gathered wood scraps and paper, started a small fire to keep herself warm, and fell asleep. A spark from the fire ignited some oil on the floor. Deborah awoke to flames and smoke. She then escaped through the window she had broken. The fire quickly engulfed the house where it killed Stuart as he was sleeping in his bed. Whoa, that's a lot of facts. Go back to the started a small fire and that a spark from the fire ignited some oil on the floor. Think back to what we saw about arson. Arson requires malice, and the malice in arson is either intentional or with reckless disregard for the risks. I think we have reckless disregard for the risks here. Burning of the dwelling house of another. So I think you can make a case for arson. You definitely need to analyze that here. But beyond that, it killed Stewart. So now we have crimes against the person. So we go back over to the schema and take a look at what we have in crimes against the person. We have homicide and non-homicide crimes. You need to know the definition for homicide and the elements. On the California bar, what's really crucial about any kind of a homicide analysis is to know the 4 ways to find the mens rea necessary for murder: malice, intent to kill, intent to do serious bodily injury. I see neither of those here. Wanton depraved heart, reckless indifference for the quality of human life. That is very iffy here because she thought that the entire residence was uninhabited. Felony murder is a death caused in the commission or attempt of any inherently dangerous felony, and those include arson. So I think you can and should analyze felony murder here. And remember the defenses. There's a statutory overlay anytime you analyze murder on the California bar. Look at whether you can elevate it to first degree. And of course, again, the defenses, which we already looked at in some detail earlier on. But now, what if you don't find the malice for murder? Then we look at involuntary manslaughter, criminal negligence, a gross deviation from the standard of care, much higher standard than that in tort negligence. And you have to be aware of the risks. What about misdemeanor manslaughter? Unintentional death arising out of a criminal act that's not a felony. But the crimes we see here are felonies. So you could analyze both of these. I think you really have to analyze criminal negligence as an alternate theory to murder. I'm going to write a note to myself quickly in the margin to remember when I write up these crimes against habitation that I need to look at the intent when she broke and entered, not the intent afterwards. And that's important to crimes against habitation and to the crimes against the person. This is a tremendous number of facts and a lot of theories I have to analyze, and I have to do it rapidly, and I don't have time to go into huge detail, but I do have to cover all those elements and all the forms of malice. The second call has to be easier to analyze, so let's take a look at that. What do we see in the next paragraph? Officer Oliver, who was patrolling the area, saw Deborah walking on the sidewalk 3 blocks from the fire. When Officer Oliver asked her what she was doing outside on such a cold night, Deborah said, "I started the fire." That goes to Deborah's motion to suppress her statement. She's charged in criminal court and moves to suppress. That goes to custodial interrogation. 2 elements, both of which have to be thoroughly analyzed. Custodial. Would a reasonable person feel free to leave? He just asked her what she was doing outside on such a cold night. There's no evidence that he had her in custody at all. There's no evidence that she did not feel free to leave. No evidence of a weapon, nothing that would go to custody. The only argument you could make would be that anytime anyone is approached by a police officer, they don't feel free to leave, but that isn't going to cut it. What about interrogation? Should Officer Oliver have realized that what he said to her was likely to elicit an incriminating statement. We have no evidence that he even knew that there was a house burning 3 blocks away or that it was arson. So how could he have known that he was likely to elicit an incriminating statement? I find this call much easier to analyze. And a point that I should make, and probably don't often enough, is that when you get 2 calls, one of the first things you have to do before you start writing is decide what weight those calls have. In other words, how long should you devote to each call? It takes me 15 minutes to read the hypothetical and spot the issues and be jotting them in the margins. I go back and I quickly reread the hypothetical, looking for facts that I have not yet identified as belonging to an issue, because on the California bar they don't give you a bunch of useless or red herring facts. Everything goes to an element or an issue that you should be writing about. So then, once I have glanced through it again, I look back at the calls and I quickly think about how long it's going to take me to write up each call. On this one, call 1 is going to take me most of my time. I have 45 minutes to write the answer to this hypothetical. Call 1, as I've jotted in the margin here, I'm going to have to write crimes against habitation and crimes against the person. On call 2, the big issue is custodial interrogation, and it's relatively straightforward. So I'm going to devote 3/4 of my writing time to call 1 and 1/4 of it to call 2. And I'm going to keep that in mind as I'm writing this answer, because I can't afford to run over that hour. If I do, I'm going to shortchange myself on time for essay 2 or for the performance test, and that is a real danger. If you've stuck it out to the end here with me, then help me out, please, by liking this video, by subscribing to the channel, and tell anyone you know who might benefit about this YouTube channel. If you would leave a comment to tell me what else you would like to see on our channel to help you with your studies or with the bar, that would be most appreciated.